certain phase, and the beginning is not where it comes. At the beginning, you're just trying to make every single hero as awesome as you can possibly do. One of the things that actually, kind of a cool thing that happens is as we work on each new hero, we have a little bit of an arms race where the next hero is even slightly more awesome, so then we go back and make the first hero even a little more awesome. So that's kind of a fun back and forth, but it just makes the characters better and better over time. So focusing on a couple of these signature skills, the first one is the barbarian. Seismic slam. This is basically a skill where the barbarian raises a weapon above his head, slams it on the ground, and essentially anything in kind of a cone in front of him gets just kind of rocked and destroyed. So this skill was the very first skill we actually made for the barbarian, and probably one of the first skills we made for the entire game. It took a lot longer to make this skill than it takes to make most skills. We did a lot of iteration in the animation department in particular, because trying to make the barbarian feel physically powerful, generally we associate kind of big, bold movements with physical power, but if you want a game that plays really fast and feels responsive, you want the movements to be really fast. And so getting that balance of fast movements with really but a powerful feel was a big challenge, and we had to try a bunch of different ways that we can animate it to get that right. So once we did that, got through kind of all that iteration, what was funny was we really didn't like the skill for most of the time. We got the programming done on it, and I don't know, it doesn't seem that great. We got effects on it, and the effects were really cool, but somehow it just didn't sing to us. It wasn't until we actually got sound on the skill that we finally went, wow, this skill's really awesome. This is really fun. And the key to that, I think, is that it takes a lot of faith to get through this process. But once you do get through that process, all the skills that come after that come much quicker, because everyone looks and goes, oh, what is the barbarian about? Well, freaking look at Seismic Slam. He rocks the world with like great physical power. And the next 4 or 5 skills we did for the barbarian almost required no communication between design and art, because art already knew what the barbarian was all about. Design already knew what we were designing for. We had a great skill that acted as an example. So the next one I want to talk about is Witch Doctor, Firebomb, which went through kind of an interesting evolution. One of the first skills we did for the Witch Doctor, and originally it was more like a fireball spell. So when you cast it, you cast it in a direct line from the Witch Doctor to your target. So it would, pretty much anything got in the way, it would hit that and it would explode. And we figured that would be cool because explosions are cool. Everybody likes explosions. Does everybody here like explosions? Yeah? Yeah. I like explosions. I figured you would. So the problem was, it wasn't really a problem. I mean, it's a cool skill, but we've all seen it. And what the artist came back and said was, well, we didn't really imagine the Witch Doctor like this guy. We imagined him actually with his magic being more physical. So we thought maybe he would be concocting some kind of crazy magical alchemical thing, stick it inside a skull, and that would be the bomb. That would be what would explode. And once it was a physical projectile, which designers thought, well, that sounds really cool, let's do that. But once it was a physical projectile, we didn't want it to travel in a straight line anymore. We wanted to have it thrown like a projectile. So it became an arcing projectile. It could be thrown over walls, but that really changes the gameplay a lot. You have to be a little more predictive with its location, but it's got some advantages in that you can avoid obstacles and hit the exact target you want. It's a great example of how art and design can work together to iterate really well to make a very original, very cool skill. Now, the last thing we did was the artist really wanted to put this image of the Witch Doctor into the fire effect, and I think you could see it a little bit there, but basically when the fire goes off, it's like this big kind of form of his hands and face, and we just thought that was so cool. We actually did it with a lot of other skills. The Horrify skill, Mass Confuse, and again, it just kind of shows how that one first skill can inform a whole class. So to kind of sum up, this is essentially how we develop skills. We just kind of rinse and repeat this idea. The first few are really take some time. They're really hard to do, but after that, the rest come much, much easier and makes for a really cool character. So I believe I'm passing to Julian now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk about special effects for Diablo 3. and some of the thinking that went into the things that you've seen in the demo. So right at the beginning, we adopted some overriding goals, sort of fundamental philosophies that we wanted to follow when we were creating the graphics for these things. And so I'm going to give you a description of what they were. The first one was that the players, that the Diablo 3 is a highly visceral experience where players experience brutal combat and wield godlike power. And the other one was that characters should do crazy things, express more personality and more backstory than past Diablo games. And so the goal of special effects in doing that. So with this whole godlike power notion in mind, let's jump ahead and take a look at what we've done for some of the player skills. So what we do when we want to start working on these graphics for the skills is we take all this information that we can get from design and from the concept departments and even from ourselves as effects artists, and we just sort of start bouncing the idea of the skill back and forth verbally, and we try to come up with, we try to actually top each other up a little bit, try to one-up one another. Like, who can come up with the most crazy description of this thing that says what it is but reinforces what that character is about? So, for instance, we might, when talking about the barbarian, we would say things like, when he leaps, he lands with the force of a small bomb, or when he charges, he breaks the sound barrier. When he can hit the ground so hard, he causes seismic explosions. So you can see that those things are really physically oriented descriptions. And from there, we would go on to actually make the graphics. But we did even more for the barb. We added this ability of his to like tap into his own lineage through the power of the ancients, whom you may remember from Diablo 2 expansion. And so he has this other skill called Hammer of the Ancients, which is where he sort of wields this giant like god hammer, which at first seemed kind of mystical to us, but the bottom line there is that he's still swinging like this gigantic hammer, which is a really physical thing to be doing. So it works out. So on the flip side, for the witch doctor, obviously we wanted to get a really rich voodoo vibe.
Hit it one more.
One more. But we wanted to avoid that straight up magic caster feel, where he's not just conjuring things out of thin air. So witch doctors just don't channel magic. They take real world objects and infuse them as sort of a voodoo magic. So going back to that description, that verbal descriptive method, we would say things like, okay, he's gonna throw a shrunken head filled with some kind of alchemical cocktail. He's gonna create swarms of locusts by blowing on voodoo dust from his palm, or he's gonna sprinkle dust in the air and cause illusions that frighten monsters away. And of course, you're not a witch doctor unless you're doing something with zombies. Zombies, witch doctors, they go together. But here we didn't want to just do straight up zombies, you know, the kind of slow wandering around humanoid zombies. We wanted something with a twist. So we got that by basically taking normal concepts and then just sort of smashing them in together with the idea of zombies. And so when we had this idea of doing a skill like kind of like Firewall, we sort of twisted that with zombies, and that's how we came up with Zombie Wall. And then other ideas were a little bit more straightforward. So we got this idea that, you know, if a man's best friend is a dog, then a witch doctor's best friend is sort of this zombie dog thing, which is what became the mongrel. And the only thing better than a zombie dog would be an exploding zombie dog, so we blew them up. So that kind of takes care of our godlike power. The other side of our brutal combat equation is that if heroes need crazy effects to punch up their personality, that monsters also need really insane impact effects as well. So to start off, we focused on just impacts alone. You're going to hit monsters a lot in this game, and you're going to see a lot of blood because of that. And we didn't want the blood to get too monotonous, so we started out by just making a ton of different kind of blood sprays. And then Diablo is a game where there's all sorts of kinds of damage, and you need to be able to get an idea when you're hitting somebody which kind of damage is actually happening on that monster. So we made different impact effects for each of the damages. We have at this point, fire, cold, lightning, poison, and a new kind of damage called arcane. But we took it a little bit farther in that critical hits are a much bigger deal in Diablo 3 than in past games. So what we did there was we took all of those hit effects that we had and we just made really much louder versions of each of them to kind of highlight that when those events are happening. So with all that hitting happening, you know, you're going to be killing a lot of monsters as well. So we really wanted to pump up the player's sense of impact on monsters. So in Diablo 3, the majority of monsters die using ragdoll physics. And we really like this because it allows the player to really interact with the monsters when you kill them. Depending on what kind of damage or the force that you're hitting them with, they're going to die in a different way. And then you can kind of set up little circumstances where you can like knock them off of ledges or make them go flying.